So our next speaker, he's St. Louis, from St. Louis. I'll say his name in just a moment, but relatively new customer, but really excited to work with them already. So Dr. Jeff Borden, who I will introduce and give you some background on him in just a moment. He actually recently wrote a blog called "Mobile Applications Shouldn't Be a Fire Extinguisher." And I encourage you to take a read. It's on our website. It was a wonderful blog, and I was just telling him it should be a full-blown article placed in a publication somewhere. So take a read when you have a moment. But in the meantime, Dr. Jeff Borden, he's the CIO of St. Leo University. And Dr. Jeff Borden travels around the globe. He has witnessed thousands of initiatives, ideas, and strategies for education. Many of them have failed. A few have shined, but through conversations and observations with teachers, students, administrators, and even government officials, Jeff has taken these failures, solutions, and ideas and developed a framework to help us get to best learning. He calls it Education 3.0, and it has led to work that is transforming teaching and learning at scale at St. Leo University. From a system that promotes artificial intelligence to a dispersion model for his I'm going to back up here. From a system that promotes artificial intelligence to a dispersion model for best instruction, this Chief Innovation Officer is moving the needle every day. As a lifelong learner, as a faculty member for 20 years, and as the dad of an overly verbal 9-year-old, Jeff employs Education 3.0 in every facet of his life. Please help me welcome Dr. Jeff Borden to the stage as he shares what we can do, what we shouldn't do, and what we may one day be able to do to make learning the best it can be for every teacher and learner.
I forgot to tell you, I was president of my 6th grade class twice. A few people got that, okay. What I'd like to do is talk about transforming a culture today. I happen to agree with the very first keynote that we heard that higher ed struggles when it comes to learning. I want to see if I can't explain that to you with a little bit of a demonstration this morning. What I'd like you to do, please, is I'd like you to stand up. You may want to get behind your chair or something, because I'm going to ask you to sort of move forward on the balls of your feet, because I'm going to give you a test. And when you actually get into that specific configuration with your body, we know that it actually helps the limbic system avoid all the extra stuff that's going on out here. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask you 3 rapid-fire questions about what you see on this screen, and I'd like you to shout out the answers to me, okay? So lean a little bit forward, pay really close attention, and speed is what's going to get it for you here, okay? Really, really fast, and shout it out, okay? These 3 questions are going to go rapid-fire. Everybody ready? Oh. Wow, thank you. Okay, here we go. First question. You see 2 objects on that slide. Please spell the largest object. Good. The 2 items on that screen together cost $1.10. The ball is $1 less than the bat. How much does it cost for the ball? Oh. All right, you can have a seat. I was kidding. There's no third. Go have a seat. I tricked you. Now, I heard 2 people say it correctly, and I think I heard about 12 people say it incorrectly, and the rest of you didn't say anything at all. The reason that you struggled with that last question, the second question there, was because your brain wants to be efficient. Your brain does not want to learn. Your brain does not want to think. Your brain isn't worried about being correct. It's worried about being efficient. That's what our brains want to do. And that's what you and I struggle with every time that we have students inside of a classroom, is how to overcome that natural desire by our brains to not have to worry about learning, to not have to worry about thinking, to instead just be efficient. The answer, of course, is 5 cents, because if the bat was $1 more than the ball, it would be $1.05 and 5. But the answer most of you gave was 10 cents, because you see $1.10, $1.10, done. We want to be efficient. That's one of the problems we're facing in higher education every day. In fact, all of education, that's one of the problems. Now, at the same time, we've got all these studies that come out all the time that talk about just how much of a struggle it is to get a job today based on the education that somebody got. Jacobson wrote this great book in 2013 called The Future of Work. And in that book, he says, for the last 50, 55, 60 years, we have had essentially these things you see here as the pinnacle of employment. This is what CEOs wanted. This is what business leaders wanted. This is what entrepreneurs wanted when they hired people. These were the things people wanted. But in 2005, that started to change. In 2005, you started to see people who wanted employees who not only were okay with change, but liked it. People who love change. Now think about that for a second. We have got students leaving institutions that hate change, and they're going out into a world that says, we want you to love change. That's pretty difficult. At the same time, they want leaders at all levels. It's not just a management principle anymore. They want everybody to be a leader. They want everyone to be autonomous because they say by 2025, about half the workforce is going to work remotely in some capacity or another. Are they ready to do that? Are they prepared to do that? Leaders want people who can actually collaborate. Now, collaborate today means something different than it did 25 years ago. 25 years ago, it was just shared work. Now, collaboration across most facets really has to do with interdependence. That my result is dependent on your result, and we've got to work together in order to make that happen. And then they want people who are innovative. They want people who can create. Now, this requires problem solving, but it also requires problem finding. And then it requires people who use creativity, use critical thinking, all the things that we have espoused to for years. They want innovators in their companies. And then finally, they want people who can curate, who can focus away from all of the junk, the litany of things that are out there, and whittle it down to the really important salient points. That's what employers want today. So, as an educator, look at that, and I think, man, we have some problems in higher education. You heard just a moment ago a little bit about me. This would be my Wordle. This would be my word cloud as to who I am, my electronic resume. And as this kind of shows, there's a lot of different things that make up who I am. I am the Chief Innovation Officer at St. Leo. I came there just a little over 2 years ago to do some stuff I'll share with you in a little bit. I have been teaching. I'm a professor for years. I go around the world speaking to conferences like this about how to transform education. I've been to 38 countries. I've been to every state except for Alaska. I really, really love this stuff. But there's a lot more to me than just my work life. You might see up there that I play disc golf. I play the guitar. I have a dog named Doug. He's up there somewhere. These are the things that kind of make up who I am. But it's not until you take all of this and you put it into some sort of meaningful pattern that you get a decent semblance of this guy who is standing in front of you today. So what I want to talk to you about today are what I call the C's of education. And there are a lot of them. We are always worried about critical thinking. We're now worried about computer literacy. We're worried about change. We're worried about culture. And it's those that I want to focus on today so that we have a little bit better sense by the time we're done of how to navigate some of those C's together. I'm sorry, that's a horrible pun, but I'm going to go with it, all right? So I want to talk to you a little bit today about how to start to navigate some of these C's as we move forward. The 3 C's that I want to talk about specifically are change, culture, and context. The 2017 Horizon report came out this year and said one of the things that most people are going to start looking to adopt in about 2 to 3 years is the next generation learning management system. That most people will finally be mature enough in 2020 to say, I need the next gen learning management system so that I can get the right kinds of push notifications, the right kinds of tools that my students are expecting. For most people, by 2020, they'll be ready to start adopting that. For the last 18 months at St. Leo, we have built one. We actually have one. We took a bunch of commercial tools and we stitched them together using APIs in a particularly clever way, I think, that allows us to have unbelievably rich data so that I can literally measure any learning variable against any other learning variable coming out of our system. Now, if that's too much for you to believe, I have plenty of assets out there on the web. You'll be able to see them at the end. But during that time, we have not just replaced an old LMS for a new one. We transformed a culture. We changed the context that people came to learning with. We have teachers now who approach their classes differently, whether it's on ground, online, or a hybrid. We have changed the paradigm for a lot of people. So it's those three things, change, culture, and context, that I want to talk a little bit about today. The way that we did that at St. Leo is through a change model that I started working on in 2015. I've written this and put it in a few papers. And I want to talk to you today not about all steps of the model. I just want to focus on a couple. I want to look at three. I want to talk about the importance of defining the actual problem. I want to talk about controlling the narrative, and then I want to talk about establishing some quick wins. Three really crucial pieces in this change transformative model that will actually help you get where you're going. So as you heard just a moment ago, I wrote a blog for Modo recently that talks about how your applications, in fact, none of your software should be a fire extinguisher. If you're not sure what that means, check out the blog. But essentially, it says this: you shouldn't have any solution at your campus that only solves one problem. That is a waste of money, it's a waste of resources, and it ends up with siloed experiences over and over and over again. You heard in that opening keynote that integration is the key, according to that McKinsey report. We need to integrate these experiences. So, when I came to St. Leo a little over 2 years ago, I started talking to people about the problems that St. Leo has. I started to identify some problems that I thought St. Leo was facing. And those problems started to mount. I'm hoping, as you're looking at this list, that you're seeing some commonalities with your problems. I don't have a slide big enough to hold all of our problems. There are a lot of things that we wish would be different, that we want to change, some that we have to change, and so these problems sort of pile up day after day. Lion's Share, which is that system that we built, fixes dozens of these problems, or it at least addresses or attacks them in some meaningful way. Now, I can't go into all of the different solutions that we tried to deal with, but I'm going to focus on one. And I'm going to focus on the one that I believe we all share in common, and it is that opening problem I talked about, the concept of learning. I want to talk about just how difficult it is to really engender learning at your campus. So as I think about that problem, I go back immediately to neuroscience. It amazes me just how little connection there is between education and neuroscience these days. Why don't we have conferences together? Why don't we do papers together? It's really astounding to me. Let me see if I can give you an example. Dr. John Medina wrote the book Brain Rules. Highly recommend this book. If you've not read a primer on neuroscience, this is a good one to start with. And in Brain Rules, he talks about an experiment that he's done for years. And he's done this and replicated it over and over and over again. And it basically works like this. He will bring people into his lab and he will have them either hear information or read information. They will be focusing on words, all right? Very much like a college lecture, very much like an e-learning experience where instead of you having the students read the homework and listen to the lecture, now they read the homework and they read everything else. So you read some more, and then you take a test. All right, now John Medina has done this experiment to try to show that that's not necessarily the best way that learning should take place. And so what he's done is he's brought people in and said, I want you to memorize as much of this as you can. And he's given them different ways to do that. He's put the words in different formats. Again, this is through audio as well as reading. And then he brings them back 3 days later. And he says, I want to see how many of those words you can remember. 3 days later, when most people come back, they remember about 10%. About 10% of those words can come back in terms of recall. When he brings them back 90 days later, that number changes to about 3%. They can only recall 3% of those words. At the same time, he brings in other people, and he has done this with thousands of people over time, and he shows them images. And he can show them up to 2,500 images in one setting, bring them back 3 days later, and they will actually remember without prompting 90%. When he brings them back 90 days later, they will remember 67%, or 2/3 of those images without prompting. In terms of our memory, in terms of the visual cortex, as you start looking at how the brain works, pictures trump words always. Always. This is not a learning style thing. This has nothing to do with any sort of education psychology. This is a neuroscientific principle. Pictures are more powerful than words for almost all people. So as you start to consider that, think about the education that you and I grew up having, the education we likely shared. It was probably very word-centric. Educators love words. I love words. I'm a rhetoric professor. I love a good word. But let me see if I can't show you this at work in your life. I'm going to give you a test. I'm going to try this with you, okay? I'm going to give you a memory test, and what I'd like you to do is memorize as many of these words as you can. I'm just going to ask you to hold them in your short-term memory for about 3 minutes, and then I'm going to give you a little test. See how you did, okay? You're only going to see these for a few seconds, so just get as many as you possibly can. Here we go. And stop. What I just gave you was a list of what is called declarative information. Facts and events are declarative or explicit pieces of information. Now, I know that had I added non-declarative information to that, if I had added picture, if I had added movement, if I had added some sort of experience for you, I would have changed your comprehension, your understanding, your ability to retain. I would have changed all that information. If I would have put in some sort of meaningful way those words or words like it into some sort of simulation, kind of like this optics simulation from the University of California, Davis, I would have changed very much what you came to understand about those words and then how they actually worked, how they set inside of a context. But I didn't do that. I instead just gave you the words. Now here's essentially what's happening. Those words are attempting, as declarative piece of information, to get down into your hippocampus. We happen to know from a bunch of research that we've done about memory that words and declarative information and non-declarative information, they actually go down the same neural pathways together, but once they finally get to the hippocampus, they split and they part company. The non-declarative sits in one part of the hippocampus, the declarative sits in another part of the hippocampus. And so when you want to remember something, all you have to do is remember the thing that it was more valuable to you, the thing that was more important to you, and they will both come back together. You can think about this by thinking about a place in your childhood that you loved. You can probably not just remember the experience, but the sights, the sounds, the smells, what people said when they were there. That's how memory works. This concept is called visual indexing. Now, I can actually mess with your visual indexing. Let me show you. Visual indexing is this process that I just talked about. I want to show you how I can kind of screw around with that. I have one more list for you. I want this one for you to read it out loud. In fact, I want you to shout it, okay? I want you to read this list from top to bottom out loud as fast and as loudly as you can. But there's one catch. As you read it, I want you to read the color, not the word, okay? Top to bottom, out loud, as fast as you can. Go. All right. I heard somebody mess up on word 2. Now, why? You've probably seen the Stroop test before, especially if you're in psychology. You've probably used this for years. The Stroop test does what it does because I'm asking you to remember 2 pieces of declarative information and pick one over another. Our brain doesn't want to do that. It wants to put declarative and non-declarative together, not 2 pieces of declarative together. So when I say pick something that you learned cognitively speaking at about the same time, you learned the symbol for letters and the symbol for color at roughly the same cognitive time in your life, and I'm saying pick one of those out over the other. That's very difficult to do. That's how we know that visual indexing is so powerful, because when you do the same thing with declarative and non-declarative, it works really, really, really well. Your brain just sort of hums. See, here's what's happening. I'm actually giving you more parts of your brain to use when I use declarative and non-declarative together. You're actually starting to use the amygdala. You're starting to use the neocortex. You're starting to use other parts of the brain by which to remember. Now, doesn't that make sense? That we want our students to use more parts of their brain rather than less? When you just talk at them or ask them to simply read and only read, they're employing one part of their brain. What we're doing is we're training neurons. We've watched these neurons be born. We can watch that happen today. That one on the left is a trained neuron. It is a neuron that was born and was fed by getting a piece of information more than one time in more than one way. And so those little tendrils come off called neurites, and they look for other neurites, and they form together to soon become a neural pathway. Whereas the untrained neuron on the right is a piece of information that was given one time in one way and then left. That is a neuron that is waiting to die. That is a neuron that does not hold much hope for success because it was only a piece of information that a person got one time. See, as we start to think about learning, we have to think about what your brain is actually doing. Now, I just gave you a test a moment ago. Let's see how you did. I asked you to remember that list. Let's see how well you remember it. Do you agree? What's the word candy on the list? If you say yes, raise your hand. Good. I didn't fool you. All right. Was the word car on the list? If you say yes, raise your hand. No, I didn't fool you. Was the word sweet on the list? If you say yes, raise your hand. See, here's what you did. I gave you a list of sweet things. You associated context with that list. You added your own concepts to that list. You thought that's a list of sweet things, therefore sweet must have been there. But it wasn't. You know who does that every single time we send home a reading? Our students. In fact, everybody. You add your own context. You put information in that may or may not be right, often it's not right, and you assume it to be correct because it seems to flow and make sense inside of your brain. So as you start to think about learning, when we defined the problem of learning, this is one of the things that we wanted to start to tackle as we built out this next generation learning system. As we go from problems up the ladder, one of the things that we then wanted to do is make sure that we controlled the narrative. Controlling the narrative is something that I cannot express enough. As a communication and rhetoric professor, I can tell you from thousands of years of research how powerful this is. But as someone who has implemented it for 2 decades, it is really, really, really important for you to do that. Now, a story is quite remarkable. What you're seeing on the screen right there is an fMRI machine. It's a shot of 2 people talking using fMRI technology. And here's what's really, really cool. If you put 2 people in an fMRI and you have them tell a story to one another, the storyteller's brain will light up in a very specific pattern. Certain parts of the brain light up at certain times. At the exact same moment, the listener's brain will light up the same way. The story has that kind of impact. It's really, really quite remarkable. They used to think of these as mirror neurons. They actually called them that for a while. But now they know that it's really just a connection with as you heard about yesterday in the keynote, empathy. People are actually saying, oh, I can relate to that. I get that. But here's something else that's remarkable. If you take the facts out of the story and you just provide fact, 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 the storyteller's brain continues to light up. But now the listener's brain goes dark. When you don't have story, the rest of it doesn't really make contextual sense. I think I can try to show you this with this old IKEA commercial. If you've never seen it before, check out the pathos or passion that is associated with this particular commercial.
Many of you feel bad for this lamp. That is because you're crazy. It has no feelings, and the new one is much better.
Did you feel badly for the lamp? I mean, come on, how can you not? That poor, it's out there in the rain, the sappy music. Now, I don't have time today, but often I poll audiences and I ask, what do you think happened next? And usually people say, oh, someone came and rescued the lamp and they took it home and gave it a nice place. You put personal feelings on an inanimate object. That's the power of story. That's what story can do for us. When we started the process of changing out our next generation learning system up at St. Leo, we started telling a story. And the story we told was of a home theater. The metaphor, the analogy that we used was a home theater. We said, imagine building a home theater over time. Imagine all that you would have to do to make that happen. Imagine the size of the cabinet you would have to create. If you had VCR tapes, maybe you even had some beta stuff. If you had DVDs, and you also wanted to play the modern stuff through Prime, you'd have to have a VCR, you'd have to have a DVD player, you'd also have to likely have a Blu-ray player, and now you're also going to have some sort of Chromecast or whatever. And we said, why would you do that if you had the opportunity to build a home theater from scratch today without having to worry about any of that old infrastructure? What would you do? you would probably get a nice TV and a sound bar and connect it with Apple TV, Chromecast, whatever you like. It's a very different home theater. We started using that metaphor as we described what we were doing with our new system because we didn't have a lot of dependencies that were old. We didn't have a lot of baggage that we had to bring in. So we were able to create a bunch of it from scratch. People started talking about that. The professors started coming back to us saying, hey, I've just included something that's kind of like an Apple TV. Hey, I just did something that's kind of like a Chromecast. I did this really cool thing in my class and I used the technology to do it. They started to adopt our language. You'll know your stories are working when you hear them coming back to you. That's the power of narrative. People have something to connect with, some sort of context to move to. They have that pathos, that passion that they can start to associate with whatever it is that you've done. The last step I want to talk about out of those 10 steps is how to then establish some quick wins. Because establishing those quick wins allows you to build on those quick wins over time and make something bigger and better and bigger and better. As we started dealing with the quick wins that we wanted to have, I basically said to my team, look, we got to overcome some perception. And I know that I have to do that with you this morning. I want to tell you what I mean by that. There are two kinds of perception that we talk about when we research it. Number one, we have internal perception. Those things we believe to be true. Things you believe about yourself, things you believe about your ideas, things you believe about your concepts, whatever it may be. And then on the other side of that is external perception. These are the things that others believe about you. Others believe about your ideas, your concepts, etc. And as you're dealing with any sort of argument, you have internal and external perception warring with one another. I'm going to show you how this works in just 1 second with yourself, and to prep you for that, what I'd like you to do is to think about your favorite ice cream flavor of all time. Don't tell anybody, just keep it to yourself, but just for a moment, let that percolate, your favorite ice cream flavor of all time. And what I want to try to show you is how internal and external perception can be at war. How those things can really come into conflict with one another. See, at my house, I'm going to show you a Venn diagram. No education talk's good without a Venn diagram. Let me show you a Venn diagram from my house and what the perception Venn diagram looks like where I live. Some of you are familiar with this. I worked my way through my master's program doing stand-up comedy. For 3 years, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I went down and did 2 shows on Friday, 2 shows on Saturday, 1 show on Sunday at the Denver Comedy Works. For 3 years, I did that. And I had a great 12-minute set by the time I was done. I could make people laugh pretty regularly for 12 minutes over and over and over again. So when I then got married, there are things that I say, there's times that I just think this is so opportunistic, I can't let it go. So I will bring something up to my wife and she'll look at me and I'll say, I'm sorry, honey, I just can't turn it off. And she'll look at me without missing a beat now and she'll go, why don't you try? I go, oh, okay, got it, right? Now, that's at my house. Let me show you it in your life. Take that your favorite ice cream flavor. Okay, everybody got one? Now, look at somebody sitting at your table or someone near you. Look them up and down really well. And then say to them, I'll bet your favorite ice cream flavor is, and then tell them what you think it must be. And then very importantly, tell them why. Go ahead. Okay, very good. I love this exercise. I have done this exercise everywhere I've ever gone. I really, really love it. And you have done exactly what everyone in the world does. I want to tell you what I just witnessed, okay? Here's what I just saw. Most of you did this. Most of your reactions. Now, I remember, I can't hear you, but I can see you. And most of you went like this. The person said, your favorite ice cream flavor must be, blah, 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 whatever they said. And most of you went like this. No. And then you told them whatever you told them. But I saw 3 people in this room, and there's probably more, but the 3 of you will definitely know who you are when I say this. 3 of you had the perfect description of internal and external perception coming at one another. Here's what 3 people in here did that I saw. 3 people went like this. The other person said, your favorite flavor must be, whatever they said. And these 3 people went like this. I think they were offended. Now again, I don't know what was that, chunky monkey? Vanilla? I think people are like, what am I, plain? What does that mean? That's the difference between internal and external perception. When it comes to education, we are dealing with this at a heightened level because almost everyone believes themselves to be an expert at it. Almost everyone believes that they know how education should work. Students think they know, parents think they know, teachers think they know, administrators think they know. Everybody thinks they know, oftentimes because that's what they did or didn't experience. I think about this guy, Mark Edmundson. He's a professor in Virginia, and he wrote an op-ed piece in the New York Times a couple of years ago that basically said, look, can't we all just agree that digital communication, digital application, that it just doesn't work in education? It's not good. Online learning doesn't work. Mobile learning doesn't work. Can't we all just agree that it may work for shut-ins and prisoners, but other than that, that's not why students come to college. And here's what he said. He goes, students come to college, we all know this, because they are in search of the great lecturer. They want the mighty lecturer, and that when they find the lecturer who inspires them and motivates them, who gives them the knowledge, who feeds them all this information, that's when they come away from college a well-rounded person. That's what he said. Now, as I read this, as I often do, I actually look for contrarian positions. I always try to find people who disagree with what I think, and I didn't agree with what he wrote. So I started looking to see, do other people agree with this? Is this a common thought? And I came across some information in terms of the National Survey of Student Engagement, came out in 2009, where students were surveyed and basically said, you know what? 50% of all of our experiences are indeed lecture. 50% of the time we're being lectured at. About 25% of the time they're being tested, which means that about 25% of the time they're actually engaged in something active. And so I thought, wow, I guess people do agree with Mark Edmundson. There's a ton of lecturing going on. I then started to keep looking. In 2014, an article came out in the Science Insider that talks not just about the ineffectiveness of lectures, but actually how they're hurting people in terms of grades. Students in a lecture-based experience are 1.5 times more likely to fail. They are getting half a grade lower on their exams if they are in a consistent lecture experience. And then I started thinking about this guy, Eric Mazur. I don't know if you've had a chance to hear Eric Mazur. He's a physics professor at Harvard. In fact, he was voted Lecturer of the Year at Harvard, which, you know, they believe themselves to have some of the best lecturers on the planet. I don't know if that's true, but that's what they say. And Eric Mazur was voted the best at one time of all those lecturers. And Eric Mazur realized over time, what a lot of lecturers realize over time, that his students, even though they seemed to be enjoying his experiences, weren't learning anything. That he was bringing them back a semester later and retesting them, and they'd forgotten almost everything that he had gone over, even though they'd gotten A's in his classes the time before. And so he was like, why is that? What is going on? So he did what any of us would do. He developed a machine that would measure brain activity over the course of a week and attached it to 70 of his students. You know, only at Harvard, right? These guys are awesome. So here's what he did. I'm going to show you a student's brain activity in 1 week at Harvard. Now, I don't have time to show you all 70 pictures. You're just going to have to trust me for a little while that they're all the same. But you can check him out on his blog, Confessions of a Converted Lecturer, and you can see what these pictures all look like, because they all look like what I'm about to show you, all right? This is a Harvard student's brain during a 7-day period at Harvard. Notice what happens to their brain activity when they go to class. They look dead. In fact, I think it's interesting. The only other time during your week that happens when you're awake is when you're watching television. I think the lecture is the educational equivalent of a sitcom. In fact, you have more brain activity while you're sleeping than you do. If you really want to get your bang for your buck out of a lecture, I think you should sleep during it. That's going to find, no. Lecturing is not the end-all, be-all of education. Now, please hear me. I understand the irony of what I'm saying to you right now. I'm giving you a lecture. I'm not saying there's no place for one. I am saying, however, they should be strategic. They should be surgical almost. To think that I can deliver the world's best lecture day after day after day after day, and that I can do that once, put it away for 6 months, and bring it out again the next term or a year later, and do it again, that's a tremendous amount of hubris. The lecture that I'm giving you today, I have worked on for 20 years. I have given pieces and parts of this at various times over a 20-year span. I have worked this up just like I did my comedy routine. To get 12 minutes, it took me 2 years to get a solid 12 minutes. It's taken me 20 years to get this. We can't expect ourselves to do that every single time we walk in front of a group of people. There just aren't others like that. We've got to be very, very careful. So when we started thinking about this at St. Leo, we said, all right, well, what do we do to impact this? What's a quick win we can get? And I happen to know about this tool that I had seen down in Australia, and I brought it up to St. Leo. It's one of the parts of our system, because we know that lecturers do a couple of things. First of all, they speak very quickly. Now, they should speak quickly because that keeps attention and what's called audience arousal. That's a good thing. However, if a person is lost and they don't have a chance to stop the flow, then that student's going to be in trouble. At the same time, they use big words. That's a problem. They use really high fidelity pictures when they pick them out for their PowerPoints, and that's a problem when it comes to cognitive load and how much stuff we can take in. So if I was giving you a lecture on the heart, I might search the web or go out to a publisher site or whatever, and I might find a really, really rich, high fidelity, high cognitive load piece of information like this heart. We said, we got to stop that. We got to stop professors from walking in the door with 45 slides saying, I'm going to dump all of this on you. So instead, we built this. This is called Metal. Metal is a tool. We've white labeled all the tools in our system, so this was just called Whiteboard to our students. That's what they know it as. And Whiteboard allows a teacher to walk into a classroom and say, I want to talk about the heart. I don't want to show you a picture of the heart. Not yet. We'll get there. Instead, what I want to do is I want you to draw a heart. And I want someone else in your team or your group, I want them to label the parts of the heart. And I want you to be able to socially learn together as one of you says, no, that's not the right ventricle, that's the left ventricle. I want you to work with each other as you go through this, and I want you to have that experience. At the same time, I'm going to build this on some neuroscience, because I am going to create some norepinephrine in your system. When I say draw a heart, some of you are going to think, oh gosh, I'm not sure that I can do this. It's not going to be so overwhelming that you get anxious. It's not going to have so little effect that you're bored. It's going to give you just the right amount of norepinephrine, just the right amount of conflict. And so we allow our students to work together. And then notice the sanity check bar over on the left. If a student's getting lost, if they're getting overwhelmed, then anonymously they can tick that little thing that says, please slow down, please explain something. They can write something, they can circle something, they can write a word and say, well, I don't understand that word. You just used a big word that I don't know. And our students are having a much better learning experience. It's a conversation with an expert, rather than it being a master talking to novices with words they've never heard at a speed that they can't handle. We got a quick win with this tool. And then we built on that win. We actually used that same tool to create artificial intelligence in terms of group creation. We have a tool inside of Metal that now says to a professor, you want to create a group? What kind of group do you want? Do you want a group that has leaders in it? Well, we're going to pull from all the other systems of Lionshare, and we're going to tell you those students who have leadership qualities and leadership traits, and we're going to recommend that these 4 people be leaders in all 4 of your groups. And then we're going to take a look at those that seem to have process management or project management. We're going to suggest that you have those people in your 4 groups. Then we're going to have people who are editors, then people who are whatever. We actually have a system with some artificial intelligence right now, today, that is helping teachers teach better. That's what we can do when you iterate on top of quick wins. So, as we started to look at those quick wins and then build on those quick wins, we now had a big win. Those are 3 of the concepts that I can share with you about this process. I want to finish with this. I want to talk about how you can put those quick wins into something really major. I don't know if you remember this video that came out. It's been about a decade now. Have You Been Paying Attention, what it's called. It was designed for educators. And Have You Been Paying Attention basically said to students and teachers, look, education today is really all about this stuff, technology, edtech, computers. And in fact, it said students expect to be able to create, consume, remix, and share. That became the mantra for Web 2.0, if you remember that. Create, consume, remix, and share. That's what everybody said. Your tool has to be able to allow create, consume, remix, and share. And so these things started to be built. Now at the time, I was reading Edu-Blogger. I don't know how many of you remember the very first Edu-Blogger, the original one. There was one person called Edu-Blogger originally. No one knew if it was a man or a woman. No one knew if it was higher ed or K-12. No one was sure. But Edu-Blogger used to just talk about education. And oftentimes they would lob these bombs over the wall and say, that's a stupid idea, or hey, I really like that, or whatever. Edu-Blogger saw this video and blogged about it and said, you know what, I hate this. This is what Edu-Blogger wrote. Educators must teach students to be original, have original thought, do original work. They didn't like create, consume, remix, and share. They said, imagine a world where using other people's work to create your own was okay. We'd have never gotten past the toaster to see the benefits of the microwave. We would have never gotten past swing music to experience amazing original works like Elton John's The Lion King or other seminal works. Maybe The Lion King gives us a clue about Edu-Blogger, I'm not sure. But they did not like this concept. And so as I do, I started to think about it. I really did. I really wanted to say, is create, consume, remix, and share just a platform for cheating, for plagiarism, for whatever? And so as I'm thinking about that, I just sort of sat back and really started noodling around with it in my brain. I had one of those moments. Have you ever had, you just can't get a song out of your head? They call it an earworm, I think. I couldn't get the Lion King out of my head. It was going around in there on a loop. And so I play the guitar, so I got out my guitar, and I put down I figured out the chords for it, and I started to play them. So the chords go like this. So if you remember The Lion King, in 1996 it came out. Can you feel the love tonight? You guys remember that? Remember that when it came out? So I'm playing that, and I'm thinking, create, consume, remix, and share. I'm hoping to get it out of my brain, and I'm playing the song, and as I'm playing the song, something weird happens. I have these chords going, and I'm singing the song, and I'm thinking about it, and then I hear this, save tonight, and fight the break of dawn, come tomorrow, tomorrow I'll be gone. And then I hear this, you're beautiful, oh no, you're beautiful. And then my wife starts singing, if I could, then I would, I'll go wherever you may go. And I thought, oh my gosh, they're right. Edu-Blogger was right. These people stole the chords from Elton John, put their own lyrics on it, and called it a song. And I thought, that can't be good, that can't be right. Create, consume, remix, and share, that's not good. In fact, Adele won a Grammy with this. Do you remember Adele? Right? The big, amazing singer? She won a Grammy with this. Never mind, I'll find someone like you. I wish nothing. You remember. So, this happened over and over and over again after 1996, and I thought, oh my gosh, Elton John is amazing, and apparently everyone's ripped him off. So I'm playing this, and I'm thinking, what else can I play? What else goes with these chords? And so I'm playing, and then I heard something I wasn't expecting, something I really wasn't ready for. I hear this. Harry Truman, Doris Day, Red China, Johnny Ray, South Pacific, Walter Winchell, Joe DiMaggio. And I thought, oh, Elton John stole it from Billy Joel. Of course. That's much better for me because I like Billy Joel and I didn't really like Elton John. So I thought, good, I can handle that. And so I'm playing and I'm thinking, well, first of all, I didn't know I can play We Didn't Start the Fire, but I'm also going, this is incredible. Billy Joel started it all. And then I started playing a little bit more and I heard something else that came out just a little before this that I really wasn't prepared for. I heard this in my head. Wherever you go, whatever you do, I will be right here. Wait, that's Richard Marx. He sang that at my prom. No joke. He sang that at my prom. So I thought, oh my gosh, Richard Marx wrote a song that has been ripped off over and over and over again? That's not possible. That can't be right. So I thought certainly Richard Marx had to get it from somewhere. So I kept playing, and I kept playing, and I kept playing. And I started looking and looking and looking, and pretty soon another one popped in, and I thought, this must be it. I think we're alone now. Doesn't seem to be anyone around. And then I thought, no, that can't be right. Tiffany? There's no way. That can't be Tiffany. I didn't know at the time that she had remade it from someone else, so I thought, that can't be good. So I kept playing. I said, I gotta find something else. I went back a little bit more in time, and I found something some of you may know. We're not gonna take it. No, we ain't gonna take it. Remember that Twisted Sister? Dee Snider apparently wrote the most prolific song of our age, and it has been stolen over and over and over and over again. And I thought, that just can't be right. So I got out my iPad, and I started putting all of this in with different things, because I wanted to play around with some of the song in terms of what you could hear, what you couldn't hear. And when you really kick up the bass, watch what happens. You hear that? Now, as soon as I heard that, I heard another song. You hear it? See the stone set in her eyes, see the thorn twist in her side, right? You too. Could it have been Bono? Could Bono have written a song that has been stolen over and over and over again? He's single-handedly saving Africa. No, that's not true. It wasn't Bono. Bono didn't do that. You can go back to the earlier in the 80s, and you will find another song by a band coming out of Scandinavia. Maybe it started here. Take on me. Do you know it? Oh, no. Take me up. Go. Okay. I'll be idea. My whole life, I have no idea what that song is. I have no idea. Okay, no, it was not Aha. Aha did not start this as much as I would have liked that. So I thought, okay, it can't be any of these bands. We're going to have to go back earlier. And I thought, do we have to go to the 70s? I think we might have to go to the 70s. And then I found one from the 70s. This had to be it. On your mark, get set, and go now. Got a dream and we... It's Laverne and Shirley. Here's no Laverne and Shirley. No? All right, no. It wasn't Laverne and Shirley. You can actually go back a little before that and you'll find it. Now this one you may buy. This could have been the starter. This could have been the primer for the whole thing. This is a band that you know. You've heard that. They're probably the most famous band of all time. Find myself in times of trouble. Mother Mary comes to me. Yeah? Oh, this is your music. You're singing. All right, good. Do you like the Beatles? Could it have been the Beatles? Sure, it could have been the Beatles. It wasn't. See, you can go back before 1970, back to 1961, and you'll hear this come out. When the night has come, little Benny King, and the land is dark. Yeah, little Stand By Me, could that have been the start? It could have been, but it's not. See, you can go back to the 50s, the 40s, the 30s, you can go back to Waltzing Matilda in the 20s. You're still not gonna find the origin for the chords for this song. You can go back through the entire 1800s, you can go through the entire 1700s. You don't find the origin of this song until you get back to 1690. In 1690, the Spanish churches were using these chords and they were called the Romanesca. And this Romanesca was a progression of chords that a very famous composer went to a church in Spain, heard this, stole it from them, and put it in a song you've heard if you've been to a wedding in the last 2 decades. Da 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 da. Pachelbel's Canon in D. That's the origin for that song. So as I started thinking about create, consume, remix, and share, I think that Edu-Blogger was wrong. When you iterate and iterate and iterate over top of what we know to be true, adding new stuff to it, that's innovation. That's learning innovation. That's how you start to change and shape a culture. Now some of you may say, wait a minute, I know that bit. I've heard it before. Axis of Awesome does that. The Australian band, they're kind of like the Weird Al of Australia. You're right, they do a whole routine based around that song. Some of you are saying, I don't know who Axis of Awesome is, but I've heard Rob Paravonian do it. He's a stand-up comic who goes around the country talking about being a cellist as a kid. Maybe you've heard his comedy. You're right, he does it. Some of you are saying, no, I don't know who either of those are, but I remember those 2 little kids that grew up out of China that didn't speak English, but they sang all these songs together and they used those same chords. You're right, they did it too. Same with a girl in Britain, she did the same thing. That's not where I heard this. The very first time I ever heard this was at Denison Elementary School, where Mrs. Luckin, my 3rd grade teacher, used to teach us the songs of the 70s using these chords. And she used these chords to show us Glenn Campbell and Liberace and all things that I didn't care about at 7 years old. And that's how she started to teach us music. I then went on to be a trumpet major. I actually had a full-ride scholarship to the University of Northern Colorado, and I studied under Gene Aiken. And we used to use these chords to improv over until we finally would fall into a song everybody knew, and then it was done. Create, consume, remix, and share is how we live. It's what we do. We need to embrace it and use it. If we do, I think we'll get to a place where John Medina, the brain researcher that I told you about, the quote that he has about education, I think is something we can deal with. His last words about education are this. As I was writing Brain Rules, it hit me. If you want to design a learning environment that is directly opposed to what the brain is naturally good at doing, you would design something like a classroom. You know how we change that? Mobile, digital, e-learning. That's how we get away from this. I hope you've enjoyed the conference. You've gotten some really good ideas. Now take them back. Find your problems and organize yourself so you can solve them. Control the narrative around it, and then be opportunistic as you look for those quick wins, and you will be successful. Thank you so much for your time. Safe travels as you go home.